So for our second system, we are with our vertical tower system. This system in particular is provided by Verti-Gro. This is a 5-pot stackable tower. The substrate that we're using today in our vertical towers is coconut fiber with perlite. This is a 70-30 mix, and this is a combined mix. We didn't layer this mix. We have used several different substrates in the past and filling methods to see how we can get the best irrigation and drainage throughout our system. And this is one of the substrate mixes that we commonly use. Out here in the towers, we have all of UF's breeding lines with the exception of 2 of our towers. So all of these, none of these have the industry controls in them. So we're evaluating them under a 4 mil plastic in a open ventilated high tunnel out here on the west side of our greenhouse. And these are all hydroponically fed. So there again is a drip emitter that comes from a poly line overhead, and then each of these pots has holes in the bottom of it. So one pot drips through and irrigates into the next pot. So one of the things that we really have to be particular with or concerned about in this system is making sure that we have uniform irrigation from the top pot to the bottom pot. One of the other things that we run into with this system is that the plants on the north side of the system never get the same amount of sunlight as the plants on the south and the west side of the system. So every day we come through and we give these systems a half turn, just so that they can get equal light all the way around the tower, so we get uniform growth around the tower system. If we don't have uniform light and uniform irrigation, we'll notice that we start getting an A shape to our towers, where we have a really large pot on the top, and then they start to get smaller as they go down. So we want uniform growth. That way we have uniform harvest and production. So it's important to keep these things in mind. Early in the crop, you can see we can still lift these pots, and you can see we fill it almost to the top of that second pot, but we want the solution to be able to move freely between that top pot and the second pot. And you can see that if you overfill them, a lot of times the pots will root together. So you'll have one solid stack of pots depending on what crop. It's not as prevalent in lettuce as it is in some of the other leafy greens and herbs that we use, but it is something that we have to deal with this type of a system where they all lock themselves together. We are evaluating these lettuce for the same characteristics that we are in our NFT system, just in a different and growing environment. These are the same age, so they've been in the system for roughly 2 weeks. And we're going to come back in 2 weeks and see how we're doing with this crop as well. We have moved outside to our Verti-Gro high tunnel. This is our vertical tower system. And these transplants were planted 2 days later than the NFT were transplanted. And you can see the difference in the speed of growth out here. These are exposed to much colder night temperatures, where they've had lows in the low was 38. That was my minimum temperature so far out here in this house. We have not closed this house down. So you can see that the cold temperatures slow these plants down, their growth rate. But at the same time, I have no instance of tip burn out here also. So there's some environmental changes that happen that promote that specific response in the plant that we're not seeing in the plants grown in the towers as we were in the NFT. And I say yet because these plants are not at their mature stage yet out here, so anything can happen. They're not quite ready to harvest yet, so we'll keep an eye on these, and the NFT will be harvested. So, but I can tell you that coming out here compared to the other system, lettuce aside, is I spend more time out here having to turn the towers and try and fine-tune the irrigation to where I get equal leaching, but you can see that I don't have that asymmetrical shape to my towers yet. I've got good growth all the way around. I come out every day and give them a half turn to make sure that they're getting adequate sunlight on all sides, and the work's paying off. They look good. So we're outside now, completely outside, with our third and final system for this crop. These are the same 30 varieties that we used in our NFT system. There is 3 plants per variety across the 6 pools. And these floating rafts, or deep water culture it's also called, these are my small floats that I make for demonstration and for educational purposes. So they're perfect for doing projects like this. We have a small float system that's built out of a 2x8 boards. It's only a frame, and then we use a lining. This is a food grade lining called Ultra Scrim that we get from Global Plastics. And I tried to source a food grade material because I get those questions a lot. So I feel good about using this material, and it lasts about 2 years in the full sun. So after a while it got a little bit degraded on the top, but overall it's a very durable material for these float systems. Our idea with the float system is that we need a frame that holds at least 6 to 8 inches of water, and our raft needs to be able to move up and down with the level of our nutrient solution that's in our pool. The styrofoam rafts, we cut these ourselves, but you can buy commercially available pre-formed rafts. The common ones are from Beaver Plastics, so they're called beaver boards, and they're pre-drilled. I use net pots in my raft systems, and I have some 3-inch net pots and I have some 2-inch net pots that I use depending on what crop I'm using. But this is a 1/28 cell plug that I'm using, and this is a commercial germination mix base plug. And when we use the raft systems, we want to make sure that our transplants are well rooted. So when we pull this transplant out of the tray, we want to make sure that the particulate does not fall away from the root cube, that it stays together, because this plant has to be able to support itself inside this net pot. If it's not rooted well, it'll collapse on itself. It'll have too much contact, the media, with the solution, and it'll stay wet and the plant will drown. So we want to make sure that we got a well-rooted, this is a very well-rooted transplant, so we want to make sure that they're well-rooted, and only one of those roots has to go through the bottom of this net pot and make contact with that solution, and the rest of the roots will chase it. So as long as you have good solution, I always compare it to a bubble wand. When you put bubbles on a wand, that's what the bottom of this pot should look like. Just barely resting on that solution, but still in contact. If it's not in contact, the next day you'll come out and check on your transplants and they'll be dry. But this is the basic instruction for one of these raft systems. We could use a Rockwool cube in this system as well, but that's expensive. The drawback to using a germination mix plug in the system is that you have to wait until the transplant is completely rooted before you put it in, whereas the NFT system or one of the tower systems that we're planting into substrate means that you can get the plants into the system a little bit earlier. Now these plants were planted in the system on October the 16th. So it's the same transplant crop as we saw in our vertical system, but these made it into this floating system about a week earlier than the others, and you can tell by the growth that they're a little ahead. One of the questions that we get with this is, how do we keep mosquitoes out of the system? And part of that is mosquitoes don't like the salt solution in the system. They might breed, but they never get to an adult stage, so mosquitoes have not been an issue. Another issue is algae, like the NFT, so trying to keep algae out of the system, because rafts need to be able to move slightly, but we want to eliminate as much of the sunlight as we can. The rafts keep the pools very insulated, so the temperatures do not rise. The final is rainfall. We get a lot of questions about rainfall in the system. And a little bit of rain is not a bad thing in this system, because these plants take up a lot of water and they'll leave some of those salts behind. So a little bit of rain will actually dilute those salts down. The roots have access to all the ions, the nutrient ions in the pool, so they can search out what is there and available. Unless we have a monsoon rain that overflows the system, a little bit of rainfall can actually help and not hurt. But we can come through and test and see what our ECs are and what our pH level is. And we have ion-specific meters that we can test for nitrogen and potassium, and we can make small adjustments to the system by adding whatever fertilizer is necessary. So it looks like we've got good, healthy white roots. We've got good plant growth so far, and we've got good color. So it looks like we're on track, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. Okay, so here we are at our final system for our crop this season. This was actually the first system that was planted. So these plants are exactly 1 month old today, transplanted into the system. And they were a 4-week transplant to get enough root to be able to properly put them into the system. So they're exactly 8 weeks old today, and they are ready to harvest. So you can see outside, there's a lot of plant population in these small pools, and with higher temperatures, we could have some problem getting enough oxygen to the roots. So we have to pay close attention to make sure that we've got healthy roots in this system. But the way that the system is designed, the solution has stayed very cool. I tested it yesterday in the afternoon, and we had a beautiful day in the 70s yesterday, and the pools were all at 64 degrees. So I was really happy with the root zone temperature. And you can see that we've got great color on our crop. And what we notice out here is that we don't have any tip burn in this system either. That could have a lot to do with the rate of growth of the plants and the general environment that they're in. And we'll discuss that more later. But you can see that most of these varieties are green. We have one red variety that will pick up more color. Any of the reds that you plant in full sun outside are going to have a deeper red color than they would if they are in reduced light situation. So we can see that we get intense color. We've got nice thick leaves. There is some moisture on the plants compared to inside. The towers also had some moisture on the foliage, which is a little more prime for disease in these type of outdoor systems. So that's something else that I would monitor very closely outside, just to make sure that we didn't have any instances of disease starting in our crops. But I'm really pleased, and since they're ready to go, I've been scouting and I don't have any pests. I haven't seen any disease, and I haven't seen any tip burn. So I'm really pleased with the varieties that we have. Let's just see what kind of root growth that we've had since the last time we checked these guys. So there's our roots on the bottom of our plants. Our system is still clean. They have we've lost about 1 inch of solution. We haven't had any rain for the past 2 weeks. So we've had really perfect weather. So we've got healthy roots, we've got healthy tops, and we're ready to harvest and get rolling again.